Let me ask you something. If I told you a company is on track to lose $14 billion this year alone, what would you guess happens next? Investors pull out, right? Board meetings turn ugly. Someone gets fired. That's not what happened. That company just raised money at a valuation of over $800 billion. We're talking about OpenAI. And it's not the only one. Anthropic is losing billions. xAI is losing billions. Meta is spending tens of billions building AI infrastructure that hasn't turned a profit yet. And somehow, investors keep lining up to hand these companies even more money. So here's the question we're actually answering today. Why would anyone invest in a company that keeps losing money on purpose year after year? Stick with me, because the answer isn't really about AI at all. It's about something investors have done for decades. And once you see the pattern, you'll never read a tech headline the same way again. First, let's actually sit with how much money is genuinely disappearing here, because the number is almost hard to say out loud. In the first quarter of 2026 alone, OpenAI burned through $3.7 billion, against $5.7 billion in revenue. Do that math for a second. That's nearly 2/3 of everything they brought in, just gone. For the full year, internal projections point to something like $14 billion in losses. And that's not even the scary part. Their own long-term forecast shows cumulative losses climbing past $100 billion before they ever see a genuine profit, sometime around the end of the decade. Let me put that number somewhere you can actually feel it. The Manhattan Project, the effort to build the first atomic bomb. That cost roughly $30 billion. In today's money, OpenAI's own math says it'll burn through more than 3 Manhattan projects worth of cash before it ever turns a profit. Where does all of that money actually go? GPUs, racks and racks of them, at eye-watering prices. Data centers, built and running around the clock. Electricity bills that read like a small country's power grid. And then there's talent. The very best AI researchers reportedly pulling in anywhere from $1 million to $5 million a year in total compensation. So let's be honest about what this actually looks like on paper. Right now, AI isn't a money-printing machine. It's a money-burning machine, and everyone involved knows it. Which brings us back to the real mystery. Why do investors keep showing up? Here's where we need to flip the entire way we're thinking about this. Investors funding these companies aren't asking, is this profitable today? They're asking a completely different question. Does this turn into winner take all? And if the answer is yes, losing money right now isn't a warning sign. It's practically the whole strategy. Let me take you back to 1999 for a second, because this exact scene has played out before. Jay Leno, sitting across from a young Jeff Bezos on late-night television. Half joking, half serious. Here's the thing I don't understand, Leno said. The company is worth billions, and every time I pick up the paper, it loses more money than the year before. It's never made a profit. How does that work? Bezos didn't flinch. He just smiled and said, "We are a famously unprofitable company." And that is a conscious strategy and an investment decision. He wasn't joking, and he wasn't bluffing either. Amazon launched in 1994. It didn't post its first full year of profit until 2003. 9 straight years, losing money on purpose, while building warehouses, expanding into new categories, and pouring every dollar back into growth. Uber ran the same playbook. Before it ever turned a genuine profit, its cumulative losses reportedly reached somewhere around $25 billion. Netflix spent years losing money, building out its streaming library. Tesla lost money for over a decade before its first sustained profitable stretch. None of these were accidents. None of these were companies that simply couldn't figure out how to make money. Every single one of them made a calculated bet. Grab the market first. Worry about the profit margin later. So here's the twist. AI companies right now are playing the exact same game, just with a much bigger scoreboard. OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Meta, Microsoft, xAI. None of them are racing to be profitable this quarter. They're racing to become the thing everyone else builds on top of. Get ChatGPT into your daily habit. Get developers building their apps on your API. Get Copilot quietly embedded into how millions of people do their jobs every single day. Get Claude, get Gemini wired so deeply into a company's workflow that ripping it out later feels almost impossible. That's not a product war. That's a land grab. But here's where this story stops looking like Amazon in 1999 and starts looking genuinely more dangerous. Amazon built a warehouse once. The cost of running it barely changed whether one customer used it or 10 million did. Netflix made a show once. Whether one person streamed it or 50 million did, the cost barely moved. AI doesn't work that way. Every single time someone asks ChatGPT a question, that costs real money. Electricity gets consumed. GPUs spin up and heat up. There's no version of this where scale makes each individual answer cheaper to produce, which means the more successful these companies get, the more expensive they get to run. Growth, for once, doesn't quietly solve the cost problem. It multiplies it. And that single fact explains something you've probably noticed without quite connecting the dots. Why is every single AI company suddenly pushing subscriptions so hard? Plus, Pro, Enterprise tiers, API access billed by usage. None of that is really about extracting a little extra cash from you. It's about survival. A steady, predictable, recurring stream of money is the only thing that can even begin to keep pace with a cost structure that scales upward instead of downward. Without that recurring revenue, there's simply no way to keep the GPUs running long enough to win the actual race. So if we go back to our original question, what are investors really watching if it's not the size of the loss? Growth rate. How fast the user base is expanding, month over month. API revenue, and how quickly it's climbing. How many big enterprise clients are signing multi-year contracts? Market share. And something called lock-in. That quiet moment when switching away from a tool becomes so painful, so disruptive to a company's workflow, that nobody even seriously considers it anymore. Inside OpenAI, revenue has reportedly been tripling year over year. And when growth looks like that, a $14 billion loss stops looking like a red flag. It starts looking, to the people writing the checks, like an investment. Now, before we wrap this up, it's worth being honest about the other side of this story too. Because it's not all smooth sailing toward monopoly. This entire bet assumes something that isn't actually guaranteed. That one, or small handful, of these companies eventually pulls decisively ahead of the rest. If instead the technology keeps commoditizing, if cheaper open-source models keep closing the gap on performance, the winner-take-all story falls apart entirely. You end up with several exhausted competitors all still burning cash. None of them ever actually capturing that dominant position investors are betting on. There's also a funding math problem sitting underneath all of this. Some analysts estimate OpenAI alone may need over $200 billion in additional funding, just to keep losing money at its current planned pace through the end of the decade. That's an enormous amount of capital that has to keep showing up year after year before any of this pays off. And history offers a genuine cautionary tale here too. Plenty of companies in the late 1990s ran this exact grab, the market first, worry about profit later playbook, and simply ran out of runway before the market ever consolidated in their favor. So the honest version of this story isn't AI companies are guaranteed to become monopolies. It's AI companies are betting everything that they will. And right now, investors are betting right alongside them. Which brings us to where this all actually lands. These companies aren't really trying to make money today. They're trying to become the infrastructure everybody else is forced to depend on tomorrow. And here's the one thing worth carrying with you after this video ends. The real risk was never that AI companies are losing billions of dollars. The real risk is what happens the moment one of them finally stops. Because that's not the moment the losses end. That's the moment the monopoly begins.